Good morning. It's Friday, February 11th, 2011, and what I wanted to do today was specifically recognize that this is February, which means it's African American History Month. When I think of African American History Month, I can think of one name that comes right away to my mind, and that's Erma Henderson. Now, some of you may be saying, well, who's Erma Henderson? Because you're younger than me, or perhaps you're from outside the Metro Detroit area, or even outside the state of Michigan. Erma Henderson, she was the Detroit City Council president for a number of years. At first, in 1973, she was in a runoff election with Jack Kelly, as City Council member Robert Tyndall had died, and the City of Detroit held an election to fill that vacant seat. And it came down to Jack Kelly and Erma Henderson, and she won that election and earned a seat on the City Council. The very next year, in 1974, was an election for the entire council. So all the council was up for election at that time. And as a result of that election, she won her seat back and held it for that term. Then in 1977, for the general election for the Detroit City Council, she finished first in voting of all the City Council members, and that's how they determined who the City Council president was. The person with the most votes in the City Council election would be declared the president of the Detroit City Council. And she held that in 1977, then did that again in 1981, and again in 1985. So for 3 terms, she was the president of the Detroit City Council. And she was the first African American to hold that position as president of the Detroit City Council. Now, that's monumental in and of itself. And as I assisted her in writing her book down through the years, the Memoirs of Detroit City Council President Emeritus Erma Henderson, which is available in hardcover and softcover and an ebook. I should have a link to it on the Facebook page. If you can't find that, go to Author House, or you can go to Amazon.com or Borders and whatnot, and you can order it from them. But as I was working on her book, though being elected to the Detroit City Council and then being its first African American president is monumental in itself, it wasn't like she just came out of nowhere and established that kind of popularity and credibility. Her entire life was dedicated to African Americans and to women, and equal rights for all. And throughout her life, she's had many incidences of activism that she partook in. Now, when it came to African American History Month, Mrs. Henderson recollected that when she was a child, she would collect clippings from the newspapers of the Pittsburgh Courier and the Detroit Tribune, a couple of African American history. That noise in the background is Zen playing with his toy. Zen! And he's got himself a new little toy here. It's a little hedgehog with a squeaker in it. But let's carry on. She would collect clippings from these newspapers when she was a child that were based on African American history. I guess the way I understand it is they were sort of like Ripley's Believe It or Not, the little Ripley Believe It or Not cartoon that used to be in the newspapers. Well, these were along the same lines, featuring African American history facts. So she would collect those, and that was when she was a child. And then as she got older, she actually went out and spoke on African American History Month. Stealing the show here. So that's, I mean, she was involved in African American history ever since she was a child. Now, as I said, there's a number of incidents in her book of activism and things that she did throughout her life. And what I thought I'd do today is take an excerpt of one of them and read it to you. Now, in the 1940s, she started working at the National Maritime Union. She started at a lower level position, and eventually she worked her way up to becoming the port secretary. Now, the port secretary is a high position there in the National Maritime Union, and she discovered that she was the first African American woman to hold that position. So that's a barrier breaker right there back in the 1940s. So that's our backdrop here, and from what I'm going to read to you from. So here we go. It was through an unexpected incident with friends I made through this position that caused me to become engaged in a battle against injustice. One of the top officers, Alan Barahal, was going to get married to a girl that I knew. She was a petite French girl. Alan was the son of a rabbi, so there was a bit of controversy about this mixed marriage. I became a friend of both of them as they dealt with this issue. Alan was also dealing with the conflict within his family because he had no interest in becoming a rabbi like his father. But I listened and helped them through this, and even went with them to the city-county building to get their marriage license. The wedding took place, and the reception dinner was to be held at the restaurant in the Barlam Hotel, which was across the street from the National Maritime Union office. As we all walked in, the management of the restaurant confronted us. They told the group that they would be served, however they pointed to me and said they would not serve me. Furthermore, they said that I was not allowed in the restaurant. This not only offended me, but the entire wedding party. As all this transpired, I could see the African American cooks and staff looking through the windows of the kitchen door at the scene. After some words were exchanged, the man who had made the arrangements with the restaurant decided we were all going to walk out, leaving them with a prepared meal, and they refused to pay for it. So I decided to organize a picket line around the Barlam Hotel. It started small, but eventually grew. When the seamen found out what I was doing and why, they helped. After they'd eaten in the Union building, they would join the picket line. We continued relentlessly, even during torrential rains. The picket finally ended 7 weeks later, when the hotel finally gave in. They decided to end their discriminatory practice, especially after Jack Lawrence, the head of the National Maritime Union, flew in from New York to join the protest. That's a sample of what Erma Henderson did throughout her life. She was always engaged in seeking equal justice for all, and was a very, very special person. So that's what I wanted to spend today on. I wanted to recognize African American History Month, and to honor Erma Henderson. And have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Take care.